go over section 4.1. Now, in chapter 4, we are now going to be taking everything we learned about supply and demand, but now what we're going to do is look at it from not from a buying and selling goods and services. We are now going to be looking at it from a trying to buy labor or buy financial capital. So, in the labor markets, what we're trying to do is we're going to flip it around. So when I talked about supply, we were talking about firms and businesses. So now they're going to take off their hat as being supply and they're going to put on their hat as demand. So now the businesses are demand. And what would that mean for supply? So now we're going to have consumers that are willing to supply. Okay? So as the labor market goes, the labor market is the supply and the demand for labor. So when we talk about the supply of labor, we're talking about where does labor come from? The labor comes from the households. And then who are demanding labor? Those are the firms. So the law of demand in labor markets says a higher salary or wage in the labor market will decrease the quantity of labor demanded by employers. So that makes sense, right? Because if it's more expensive to hire somebody, you have to pay, you would buy less labor because you don't have enough money to have more of them. Now, if labor were cheaper, right, then it's like, okay, well, we can afford to buy more labor, so we would buy more. So the law of demand still applies when we're talking about the labor market. Now, when it comes to the law of supply for the labor market, go back to what you would do as a person. If someone were to pay you, $7 an hour, you would probably only work a few hours because you're like, I'd rather try and do something else with my time. But what if I were to pay you $100 an hour? Would you increase the amount of work that you're doing? Probably. If not, then there's probably a different wage for you to where you would want to work more. But the idea is that at a higher wage, you're willing to work more. And that's the way the law of supply works. A higher price for labor, higher quantity of labor supplied. Lower price for labor, lower quantity supplied. All right? So again, law of demand and supply still hold true. Higher prices, lower quantity demanded. Higher prices, more quantity supplied. Same idea. Now, at the equilibrium wage, employers can find workers and workers can find a job. So basically, the employers are like, we're going to hire this many people at this wage, and then the the firms are saying, we want these many workers at this wage, and then we have the households over here saying, yes, I agree to that. So again, we're having that agreement. We're at the equilibrium. So all it would look like is the same thing as law of demand. The market graph with the goods and services. So we would have wage up here. We would have quantity of labor. Sometimes we write QL, quantity of labor. You're going to be able to understand the lingo of economics, right? The different letters and what they mean. So QL is the quantity of labor. And then the same thing here. We're going to have a demand curve and a supply curve. So this intersection right here, this shows you at this wage, this many people are going to be hired, and this many people are wanting a job. So everybody that wants to work will have a job. That's what equilibrium is. There's not somebody out there that's like, wait, hey, I want to work, but nobody will hire them. Because at equilibrium, anybody who wants a job will have a job. So, what would be a determinant of labor demand? So, looking from a business perspective, why would a business demand more labor? What about the fact that your output increased? What if your demand for, let's say you sell t-shirts. What happened to the demand for t-shirts? It goes up. So you have to do more t-shirts. How can you make more t-shirts? You need more labor. And by you need more labor, you are demanding more. So the demand for the output will change the demand for labor. And you're probably wondering, well, if that changes the product here, that's going to change the wage. It wouldn't change demand. We have to go back first. The first thing that happened was because you're demanding more product, you want to make more output, you need more labor. You're not changing the amount of labor because wage changed. You're changing the amount of labor because you're wanting to make more output. That's the difference. So by you wanting to make more output, you are willing to demand more labor. Now, something else that will demand more labor is if your labor has more education and more training. So if we were looking at a group of people and they were to get a college education just like you, what would happen to the value of those group of people? The value of them will be increasing. So they are more desirable to have for a business. If you had to look at two different types of people and you wanted, let's say, a computer business, okay, and you really want people that are trained with computers, you would want the people that already have the certifications for that job. You wouldn't want a somebody who doesn't have any experience with computers. You wouldn't want them if they didn't already have certifications because you would have to invest in them, and you don't want to do that. You want the easiest way, which is somebody who already has that, somebody who has the education and training already. Those people are more desirable. Okay, so if we had a situation where people are increasing their education and training, then the demand for labor will be increasing. Okay, so I like to think of this one as increasing their worth. Think about it this way: if you get some more training, right, you are more productive as a worker. And if you are more productive as a worker, that's really good for a business. And if we can increase the productivity of workers, then your businesses are going to want to hire more of you. So productivity also plays in. What about technology? So technology is going to be a little bit weird here. Let's say the technology replaces labor, right? So maybe we used to put tires on the car as a human, but now a machine can do it because as technology progresses, technology could be cheaper than labor. So since it's cheaper, guess what businesses do? Businesses will go with the cheaper option, such as the machine. So the machine will replace the human. So technology could decrease the demand for labor if it could decrease the demand for labor if low skill. Now, what do we mean by low skill labor? Low skill basically meaning that a machine can do it. Like, for instance, if we were looking at making coffee, there are making machines that are able to make coffee. They're able to do it now. Not saying that making coffee is a low skill labor. However, technology is advancing to where it could replace some of these lower skill labor. Something more of a higher skill labor would be the ones that are going to be fixing the machines, right? Because you need a human to fix the machine. So then what would happen is you would increase the demand for those people that are fixing machines. So technology could work two ways. It could decrease the low skill labor demand, but it also could increase the demand for high skill labor. Maybe we use the technology to make business better, and by having more humans that understand the technology, we would demand more of those people. So technology could increase the demand for labor. Sometimes we call this high skill. The next one is going to be the number of firms. So if you have more businesses, you have more jobs, so more people are demanding labor. So if you have more businesses, more demand for labor. The next one is government regulations, such as taxes or subsidies. Taxes are going to be the money you pay to government. subsidies are going to be the money you get from government. So as a business, if you have to pay more money to taxes, can you buy more labor? No. So because you have to pay more in taxes, you have less money for labor, so you demand less labor. So if taxes go up, your demand for labor will go down. What about subsidies? If subsidies increase, that means that you are getting more money from the government. So what can you do with this money? You can buy more labor. A great subsidy could be, hey, the government steps in and says, for every employee that you hire, that's going to be $100. So for every time you hire somebody, that's an extra $100. A lot more businesses would do that. And so that would be an increase in subsidies, which would increase the demand for labor. And then finally, the price or availability of inputs. So the way this one works, let's think about technology. All right. If the price of technology were to increase, so technology is more expensive, right? And then all of a sudden your labor is here, you would demand more labor because technology is too expensive. But if technology were to decrease the cost, now all of a sudden labor is more expensive. So you would demand more technology. So it depends on your inputs. Okay, maybe you don't need high skill labor, maybe you need more low skill labor. So it just depends on the availability of the different inputs that you have and the price of those as well. So let's say the price of capital, price of technology, things like that. So price of capital goes down. So now machines are less expensive, cheaper, then you would buy less labor. If you're buying more, so the price of capital goes down, you're buying more capital. Because you're buying more capital, you demand less labor. So that's what we're talking about with availability of inputs, is are you buying machines or are you buying labor? If machines are cheaper, you buy the machines and you don't buy labor. If machines are more expensive, then you would buy less machines and more labor. So these are the different determinants of labor demand. Basically, do we need to make more stuff? Yes, so more labor. Is it more expensive to hire labor than it is to do a machine? Okay, so let's do the machine, less labor. So that's really what it comes down to as a business in demanding labor. What about the supply of labor? So now we're going to be the households. Okay, why as a household would you want to supply labor? So if we had number of workers, so if we had more people wanting to work, that would increase the supply of labor. So if we had more people graduating from college, right, we now have more people available to work, so that would increase the supply of labor. So more, let's see, more people graduating. What if you are kind of optimistic about a job? Maybe something really cool and new comes along and you really want to do that. And a lot more people want to do this new type of job. So you're really optimistic. Well, they are willing to supply their labor. So if they're more optimistic about jobs, then more supply. So sometimes if you read in the news, there's going to be a nice economy's growing, times are good. In these times, people are like, oh, things are good, I will work and I will supply more labor. What about required education? Let's think about this one. If we have more jobs requiring you to have a doctorate degree, look at how many people have a doctorate degree. And if we have more jobs that require a doctorate degree, then we would have less supply of labor. So here's another way to think about it. If everybody, if there were more people that could make money cutting hair at a barbershop, we would have more people making barbershops. But what is preventing people from making these barbershops? The license to even have a barbershop. So just because you need to have that license, a lot of people see that as an extra cost of doing it, and then they don't do it. Real estate license, same deal, right? So anybody maybe could sell a house, but that license that you need in order to sell the house prevents or deters a lot of people from even becoming a real estate agent. So by increasing the required education, you are going to have less supply. And that just makes sense, right? Because if you are looking for something very, very specific, right, you need to have 15 years experience, you need to have a doctorate degree, and you need to, have 2 pets. We have all of these different requirements. The amount of people that have all of those things are getting much, much, much smaller. So when we talk about required education, we are talking about the steps that you have to get in order to get that job. And the more steps, the higher the cost. And some people view the higher cost as not worth it. And because it's not worth it, they're not going to supply labor for that job. So just think about it. If it's tougher to even start the business or start that job, you're going to have a lot of people not wanting to work there. And the next thing is going to be government policies. So if we had a government incentive to work, then we would have more people working. For instance, if we had unemployment benefits going down, so because you're unemployed, you get paid money while you're searching for a job. So if you're getting paid less money while you're searching for a job, then you better find another job quick because you're not getting paid as much before. So we would have more supply of labor. What if we had governments that said, okay, we're going to pay you more money if you are unemployed? So now people are like, oh, I could quit my job and I can get paid money for being unemployed, and then I can find another job later. So what am I doing? I'm going to be decreasing my supply here so I could get those extra benefits from the unemployment. So that's what's happening here. So if your benefits of being unemployed go up, right, then you're like, oh, well, I get paid for sitting at home. Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to supply less labor and get paid to sit at home. This is kind of what happened during COVID with the unemployment benefits there. We had a lot more people that were like, oh, it's just better to be unemployed right now. So less labor. So these are the 3 determinants that we're going to be focusing on with supply of labor. Are there more people? Are there higher requirements, lower requirements? And what are the government policies? Government policies are basically, do we want to have more people or less people? Okay, so going back into how this looks like on a graph, we're going to have wages on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. And this example here explains how technology will affect the wages for low skill and high skill labor. Technology could replace the low skill workers and then require more high skill IT and network administration workers. That could happen, right? Because the technology replaces the people that used to put tires on cars. Now the machine can do it, but now we need the upper level IT or management in order to run the machine. Therefore, technology can be contributing to the wage gap. Wage gap meaning the people that are high skill get paid more and the low skill get paid less. And I'll show you how that works. And we can actually see this because, for example, according to the National Center of Education Statistics in 1980, a college graduate earned about 30% more than a high school graduate with comparable job experience. So basically, they both worked 2 years full time somewhere, and one of them has a college degree and one of them has a high school degree. So the same work experience, but one does have college and one has high school. By 2019, a college graduate earned about 59% more than the comparable high school graduate. So we're having this big gap between the pay here and here. And I'll show you why this is happening. Because as technology grows, okay, we are having more machines do certain jobs, and because the machines are doing it, we don't need people doing it. So your demand for labor is going to go down. And looking at this picture here, when demand goes down, we're shifting it to the left. So right here. And now look at the equilibrium. We were here at W0, Q0, but we shifted it to the left. So now we're at E1. So this is the new wage and the new quantity. So what happened to wage? Wage will go down and quantity will go down. So because the demand for labor goes down, you're going to pay workers less and you're going to hire less. Okay, so wage goes down, but then you need more of those high skilled labor. So you're going to demand more of these workers. So by demanding more of them, we're going to have an increase in the wage and you're going to hire more of them. So this is what's happening with the wage gap. You're getting paid less for low skill workers, you're getting paid more for the high skill labor. And the distance has increased. And this could be because of technology. That's one example of this happening. But that's how we have the shifts in the labor demand and supply. Now, the next thing I want to talk about was the minimum wage and a living wage. So this is a big controversy, especially in the labor market. This is an example of a price floor. Remember, price floor was the minimum price on something. So you cannot go below the floor. You cannot go below this price. So therefore, the minimum wage, you cannot go below this wage. So the employer has to pay their employees at least this hourly rate. All right, it is illegal to pay less than. Minimum wage for a full-time worker basically will have an annual income of $14,500. This is less than the official U.S. government definition of what it means for a family to be in poverty. So that's where a lot of controversy comes from, is that the minimum wage, the lowest you could get paid, is still a poverty income. Right? So that's a big driver in the news of like, oh, we have all these people on minimum wage, and then we're going to have, nobody able to afford their food and their housing. And that could be true for some of those people because only 1.5% of hourly workers in the U.S. are paid the minimum wage. Okay, so if we were looking at everybody, only 1.5% are paid the minimum wage. So it's not that common, right, when we talk about the minimum wage and it being in effect on people. It's only 1.5% of the hourly workers. So is it a concern? Maybe. And why would it be a concern? Well, because if we put a price floor in, such as demand and supply, and it's effective, meaning it is above the equilibrium. So this is a binding price floor, meaning it works. So price floor above the equilibrium, this is the minimum wage. Okay. So what would a surplus of labor look like? Well, we have these many people wanting to work. Let's call it 100. So you have 100 people that want to work, but the wage is higher. So if the wage is higher, what do businesses do? Well, businesses would hire less people. So now we have a quantity demanded here. Let's call it 40. So we have 100 people that want to work. We only have 40 people that are being hired. So that means 60. 60 people are unemployed. Right? You have 100 people that want to work and 40 people are hired, so 60 are unemployed. Now, if we were to increase the minimum wage, what would happen? Well, you would have less businesses hiring. You would have more people willing to work at this wage. So what happens to unemployment? Unemployment will increase. Unemployment's going to go up if you raise the minimum wage. That's how that one works. So, is it a cause for concern? For some people, maybe, because it's maybe not enough money to live off of. All right, but raising the minimum wage could cause some issues, such as more unemployment. So that's why some cities try to solve this issue, and they're going to have a living wage. A living wage is the amount a full-time worker would need to afford the essentials of life, such as food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare. So these cities will be having something called a living wage. It's going to be a little bit higher than the minimum wage so that they can afford these things. We'll get more into the effects of that at a later date. But that's the difference between the minimum wage and the living wage. Minimum wage is just, hey, you cannot go below this price. A living wage, we have economists and government working together to figure out the cost of this, 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 and this, and that's what you need to live. So this is the minimum that you should be paid as a living wage. So that's what a price floor looks like in the labor market. Okay, so again, we have demand, supply. This is the equilibrium, and this is the price floor. This is the minimum wage. Minimum wage. And so because this is happening, this area right here is your unemployed. If we were to put the price floor down here, okay, what would the market do? The market always goes to equilibrium. If we put a price floor down here, what does the market do? The market will go to equilibrium because this is the minimum price. So we could charge more. So therefore we would go to the equilibrium. If the minimum wage is up here, we cannot go down. So we cannot go to equilibrium. All right. In the next video, we'll go over section 4.2, which is going to be covering financial markets. I'll see you there.